The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution with which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information, without the expressed written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited. Welcome back to the Nova Society, the space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by my partner in crime, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and together we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines and history. The big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what our guests and listeners have for us today. So today we'll be welcoming Marc Ross, and Marc is a corporate lawyer turned novelist. He has written extensively in his field and has appeared on both U.S. and Chinese television and lectured at major conferences. Marc's a Stanford Law graduate and former Law Review editor, and he now lives in New York City with his wife. He is the author of The Conscripted Extremist and Attacking the Dragon, and today we will be having a discussion about China, which his book, Attacking the Dragon, is about, and looking at the correlations maybe coming from the book and how they relate to what's going on in the world today. So let's listen in. Welcome, Marc, to the podcast. So tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about that book that you've written.
Well, thank you, Mark and Scott. Pleasure to be here. So my latest book is called Attacking the Dragon, which involves China, and I'll come back to that in a second. I'm a lawyer by trade and practiced law for many years. Thought about being a writer when I was young. Decided I only wanted to be a writer, though, if I could be a great literary mind, like Saul Bellow, Philip Roth at the time, people like that. And funny thing, but I figured that I probably couldn't do that. So I went to law school instead. And then a few years ago, started picking back up with the writing. And since then have published 2 books and have several more, which hopefully will be out in the market soon. So Attacking the Dragon is China. And this is a thriller book, adventure, and most books written in the West involving China in this genre have China as the villain. We have China launching hacking attacks, bringing down infrastructure, the energy system, their navy attacking, all sorts of good things like that. This book is different, though, in that for once, China is the target. And they're being targeted by an unknown group of terrorists. And the key question is, who is doing this and how are they getting away with it? Who would be going after China? We have our 2 main protagonists are a businessman who spends a lot of time in China, has a lot of contacts, and an American ambassador in Africa. And they get enmeshed in this because they both get caught up in 2 of the terrorist attacks. He is injured in a bombing which kills about 100 members of the Chinese Communist Party, and she's the ambassador to a country where China is doing a project which is sabotaged, resulting in the deaths of many people. So they get caught up in it. China's Ministry of State Security gets involved, and the hunt goes on as, meanwhile, our hero, Wes, is suspected of being part of it, and the chase continues until we have an ending which is a surprise. So I will not share that.
We'll leave it at that. People
right.
Just yes, absolutely. And this is a very timely topic when we're talking about China today, especially in the world geopolitical environment that we're in today. So how do you relate your book to some of the things that are going on today? Where do you see the correlation? Is there correlations that you've identified as a writer? I'm assuming you wrote this book before all of the stuff that's going on happened. Is any of what you put into the book starting to look like it may be a little bit of a successful prediction?
Well, it is quite relevant. It was written before, and it is relevant in the sense that almost anything that happens internationally these days impacts China and impacts our relationship with China. So, for instance, we have the war going on in Iran. Very often we hear people talking about, is this good or bad for China? China gets a lot of oil from there. So, in that sense, it's negative. On the other hand, China has massive oil reserves, which it is doling out to other countries, especially in Southeast Asia, furthering its ties with them. So, that has a relationship to China. The whole Greenland thing has ties to both Russia and China. So, I think it's very hard to find something that goes on the international stage that one way or another does not relate to China these days.
Yeah.
Perhaps a few years ago we would have said Russia, but I think these days it's even truer of China. And in terms of my book, the theme is China's global expansion and its global presence. And that continues to be a major factor today. So, for instance, as we have reduced our aid in Africa, China has increased it, and it already had a presence. China has done what's called Belt and Road Initiative projects in much of Africa, Southeast Asia, even Europe. They've done these projects in over 140 countries. So anywhere you go, there's the opportunity to impact China or for China to play a role. And what these projects are, I think it's worth understanding, is that China makes deals with foreign countries, generally less developed ones, but not always, to build infrastructure projects. And this is their main means of global expansion. I think of it as economic colonialism. And they build these projects, they lend the country money to finance the project. The project is primarily built by Chinese companies, which the host country then pays to the Chinese company. So the money generally circles back to China, except for the part used to pay for local labor. And then the country owes China this money. Today, China and Chinese banks are owed over 1.2 trillion with a T, trillion dollars of debt from this. Much of this debt has been restructured. Some of it has been foreclosed on, and China has taken possession of the projects. And many of these projects have not worked out well. There's a dam in South America, which they built, which leaked. So they had to pull the dam from use. Now, I don't know how you pull a dam from use, but that's what the press says they've done. There's a railroad which basically goes nowhere. It's sort of a road to nowhere. Another one which doesn't get enough passengers on it, so it goes nowhere useful. So these are the sort of things. But China, as a result, has this major, major influence throughout the world. And my thought was, you're not going to attack China by invading China. And that's not a book I wanted to write. I don't think it's particularly believable. And this is China's main means of reach outside China. So somebody after China could seek to do so by going against these projects, undercutting China's relationships with these countries, undercutting China's prestige in the world, and sowing social disruption within China itself. So both these projects and members of the party are targets. That was a long-winded explanation.
Well, I think it's a great explanation. I really like the term economic colonialism. I think that that's a term that we really need to really consider, especially in today's global economy. We are post-World War II, and the idea of these powerful, armies and weapons and mass destruction and all that, basically that's from a time past. Nobody's going to use them, so hopefully. And the fact is, hopefully, we found out that Russia, when they started their war with Ukraine, is pretty much a paper tiger. They are not as powerful as everybody thought they were. And you're right. Back in the day, all we talked about was Russia, 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 being the great threat. The Chinese have always seemed to do it through the back door. And I
Yeah.
think that one of the interesting things about your book, as it relates to this is if you want to disrupt Chinese expansion as far as their influence and things like that, you're going to have to do it through technology. You're not going to be able to do it through the conventional post-World War II mentality that we here in the United States have of using weaponry. And I guess my question would be is, as you said, go in and undercut the Chinese, reduce their influence. Is the United States today, as it sits, capable of doing that now with our reputation throughout the world?
Well, we've taken a very different approach. And by the way, we once did this sort of economic imperialism. If you think
Sure.
about the so-called banana republics
Yep.
and United Fruit's presence, or the sugar companies' presence throughout the Caribbean and Central and South America, that was a form of economic colonialism, and even oil. And obviously, that has been vastly reduced. But that's what the Chinese are doing.
And we could
As
actually
to
make the
the
argument that we did that with the Marshall Plan in Germany. We could make the argument that we did it in Japan post World War II. Basically, built them up, looking for us to have an economic advantage coming from it.
Agreed, although there I'd say that there was also much more of a political
Oh,
objective of
absolutely.
saying that if they don't get back on their feet, they're going to continue to be hostile. I mean, that's
Right.
really what happened after World War One. We
Right.
imposed such onerous terms in the Treaty of Versailles that Germany used that resentment and Hitler used that resentment as a powerful tool. But today, the United States, until the latest administration, and I'm not looking here to take necessarily any political positions, but just going over the facts,
Sure.
has stepped back from many countries. We've cut the aid programs in many countries, and we've really left the door open for China to take advantage of that. And I expect to continue to see them doing that and even ramping it up. And that's all, of course, in addition to the Taiwan issue, which is China's probably biggest issue that they have.
So there's a lot going on right now. We're on the eve of Trump taking a trip over to China to meet with Xi as we speak, as we're recording this. And the way I wanted to try to look at it was I think there were four categories that we could look at how we're doing in the world at any given time, right? How anybody is doing. And it's diplomacy, soft power, which you've already mentioned, military power, which we're all a little nervous about, and economics, which is, I think, the real big lever here because we are the number one and they are the number two economic powerhouses in the world. They're coming up. We may be going down. And I think we want to, we're hoping that when the president goes over there, he manages to, through diplomacy, tie up or strengthen our economic position, play down the military aspects of our relationship with them, not give away Taiwan, which I think he would like. I don't think it would be unexpected if Trump were to sell out Taiwan for whatever monetary concession he thinks he can get out of it. And that I think puts us in a very interesting position right now, and we're going to have to wait and see if anything comes of this meeting.
I think that's a lot of good points, Scott. I think one thing we have to recognize is that anyone who is looking to the United States for support, any country, if we give up Taiwan, then nobody is going to, I think, trust us for aid. Israel, clearly, we have a very close relationship with. Our relationship with Britain and the EU has weakened, but I think it's and Canada and Mexico, but I think it's very hard if we were to give up Taiwan to convince other countries and their leaders that we are a credible force in their defense and in their support. Putting aside, of course, the fact that Taiwan is so incredibly important to us economically. The control of those chips that come out of Taiwan is as important as almost anything you can think of. So I think it raises very serious issues, and maybe we'll end up with a sort of Hong Kong type resolution, but I don't see it, if it were to happen, being a 99-year resolution like the British did. I would see a much shorter time period, which is why a book which has a bunch of terrorists trying to bring China back in is another alternative to how to do this. I'm not suggesting that the United States do this, but hey, maybe there's a book that says the United States is behind this. Who knows, right? We ought to look for such a book and read it.
Absolutely. So what is in your book? Does Taiwan play any role in that?
No, Taiwan does not. I will tell you though, that I have started writing the sequel to it.
Okay.
The book ends at a point where it begs for a sequel, and people who've read it have asked me, am I going to do so? And I promise you, Taiwan is in the sequel, and as are a bunch of other countries. Interestingly, one of them is going to be Portugal. China has extensive influence economically in Portugal. It has a number of projects there. Portugal is the closest thing it has to a base on the Atlantic. There are European countries that have tried to push Portugal to diminish China's role there, and I can see that being a point of contention over the next few years. So we'll certainly work them both in. By the way, Mark, can I mention where you can get the book?
No, please do. Please do.
All right. So the book is available in paperback and Kindle books on Amazon. In addition, you can get autographed copies from my website at amarcross.com. And Mark in that is spelled with a C. So it's AMARCROSS.com. You can also go to my website and read the first 2 chapters to get a sense of what it's like. And I'd certainly encourage your listeners to check that out and see if they like it.
Right. And we will have links to all of that in our description, our episode description. Well, any plans on having it come out in an audiobook?
We've been discussing that. And I think the answer is yes, we're going to do it. We just need to make it happen. And in fact, a lot of people have said to me, "Oh, I want to read your book, but I only read by audiobook while I'm walking or while I'm on my treadmill."
I'm guilty of that. Yes, I am totally guilty of that.
My brother does a lot of books that way, although he was kind enough to read my hard copy of it. But I think we're going to have to do it, and which is fine. And maybe also my first book called The Conscripted Extremist. And it's about a young guy, late 20s, early 30s, professional type here in New York, who gets forced by government agents as part of a covert government operation to infiltrate the extreme right, looking for the leaders of Antifa. And I wrote this book, came out in 2024. So I was sending the government out to find the leaders of Antifa before the Trump administration announced that they were doing that. But no, I do not think that they read my book and figured that that's what they should do.
You have 2 of us right here.
Yeah, I mean, really, you heard it here first. So we now know.
All right. Well, be careful. But we. So the book involves that, and our hero and his girlfriend, then to be wife, get caught up in all these dangerous situations. There's all sorts of duplicity, double crosses, murders. Actually, all my books have duplicity, double crosses, lies. I enjoy that good stuff when I'm writing. And part of what I try and do, and I think both my books do this, is not write a book that you can say, oh, this is just like another book that I read. I don't think I have looked, and I do not know of another book where China is under attack. It's always China in the Western literature. I'm sure if you go to China, there are lots of books like that, but not here in the West. Same thing with that other book. We spent a lot of time looking for something that matched it, and in some ways, the publishing industry would like you to be able to say, "Oh, this is just like such and such book," and this isn't just like such and such book. The plot lines are significantly different. And not to say it's better or worse, it's just different. And that's part of what I enjoy. And I enjoy the political overtones in most of my books.
Once China gets attacked in these incidents, what is the stand of the United States officially toward the matter?
In general, the United States does nothing. If there's a country where we have a significant enough influence to stop the government from going ahead with the Chinese project, then I'm sure we attempt to exert that. But since they've succeeded in 140 countries, it's clear that we haven't been, to my knowledge, have we attempted to match that, generally speaking. We haven't said to countries, oh, China wants to build a hydroelectric plant here for you. Well, we'll do it. I'm not aware of that. And I can tell you, in Greece, a Chinese company, as I understand it, controls the ports in Piraeus, which is the port for Athens. And I understand that the American ambassador to Greece not that long ago suggested to China that they divest themselves of that. And China politely said, no, thank you. We're quite happy with it.
I think that's Kim Guilfoyle, isn't it?
I don't remember the woman's name, but
yeah, that's Don Jr.'s ex-girlfriend.
Oh,
and Governor Gavin Newsom's ex-wife, actually, both. She is both, okay. And she is the ambassador to Greece right now. So if that's what you're doing,
that was her. That was her. They also. Now I will say though, a company that's technically Chinese but based in Hong Kong, one of the major trading companies in the world, has the rights to the ports at both ends of the Panama Canal.
Right.
And an American private equity firm put together a consortium and reached a deal with this company to buy those. But Beijing has said no, they've blocked that. And whether that's the end of the discussion or not, I certainly don't know. And I doubt many people do know what's going to happen with that.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of interesting because you mentioned China's influence in Portugal. China is also very deeply embedded in the economies in the Caribbean and Central and South America. I think right now it's the second largest trade partner of basically all of Latin America, and invests like 160 billion, I think that was the number, in mining and energy resources in Central and South America. This was something that I don't think the United States ever envisioned happening here. But one of the big populations that were showing up at the Mexican border over the last few years has been Chinese people who have been living in Central and South America for a really long time now and who wanted to make their way to the United States.
That's very interesting. If you think about it, in some places like in Bermuda, where when there was a whole big hotel explosion going on a number of years ago, a lot of them were being built by the Chinese. Now, whether they retained the ownership of them afterwards or not, I don't know. But that they had a significant presence. I remember driving along the coast highway there and our guide saying, this hotel is being built by China. That hotel is being built by China, and just sort of continuing along the way. And, if you think about it, Trump's doctrine, which is a further step on the Monroe Doctrine, is contrary to all this. But no, we haven't heard anyone say anything about China's presence in all these different countries, the way you've described it, Scott.
Yeah. I think as long as the military stays out, that, Ch China, the capitalist country, bizarrely enough, is welcome to invest anywhere in the world that they want to,
Well,
as long as they don't exercise too much control over local populations. But there is, I guess if you're a country as big as China with that kind of population, you can offload an awful lot of people into other countries. So, for example, I think that there's over 1 million Chinese people right now living in Africa, and there are 10,000 Chinese owned firms operating in Africa. So that has been a big focus of China. And now what we're discovering, of course, is that they've been buying up all the rights to rare earth minerals and things like that. Recently, Trump threatens, I want to say Zambia, but I'm not really sure, a country that was dependent on PEPFAR for AIDS drugs for a lot of its
yes.
population. And Trump threatened to withdraw what's left of PEPFAR unless they sign over their rare earth mineral rights to the United States. So
Yeah, well,
I think in a sense he's playing catch up
I
to the
think that's
investments
right.
that they've made. Yeah.
I think that's right. And clearly, Africa and Southeast Asia have been China's two main areas of success. And the United States does not have the loyalty of as many countries in those regions as it may have at one time. And in fact, in the book, two of the major uh, terrorist attacks take place in two different African countries. As I mentioned earlier, in one case, a country is highly dependent upon a dam that's being built with Chinese money and a Chinese construction company, and that dam becomes the subject or the target of of a sabotage attack, a very nefarious, sneaky one that's set up. Takes a good while to happen. Then in another country in the book, we have our terrorists backing a coup to displace a Chinese-friendly leadership, and with an anti-Chinese leadership as part of the deal. And they do something very interesting, which I don't know why no countries have thought about, which is after the coup, they tell China, we're not going to pay you the debt. We don't think it's fair. We're not going to pay you. We'll pay everybody else what we owe them, but not you. Now, what are you going to do about it, China? And it's an interesting question. Is China going to go and invade some tiny little country? And I made sure the country was in the heart of Africa, so they couldn't just bring up the Navy and take it over. But I was telling some real China experts. I have a number of friends who really know all about China, professors and things like that. And they said, well, that's an interesting idea. Maybe somebody ought to try it. So if they do, I want royalties.
And just to clean that up a little bit, PEPFAR, actually it's Mozambique, Zambia, South Africa are the three that are being totally cut off by this new executive order. So, Mark, I know that you do a lot of research for these kind of books. You've got to do a whole bunch of research. And it's interesting to get the perspective of somebody who has done research on China to kind of explain what we hear in the news today, in the major news networks. Was there anything that you learned in your research that surprised you? That you said, "Wait a minute, I didn't hear anything about this on Fox News or CNN or anybody else."
Well, actually, when it came to China, I did very little research.
Really?
For part of my job for a number of years, I traveled to China for business. Started going to China, I think, for like 2009, 2010, and took a number of trips there over the years. So every place, with one exception that's in the book, is a place that I have visited. I know what Chinese hotels are like, the first tier hotels, the second tier hotels, third tier hotels. offices. I've met with both lectured to and met personally with many professionals in China, business leaders, government officials, and party officials. So, I don't have enough understanding to write the definitive nonfiction book about China, but to use what I knew as a basis for the novel, that was fine. What I had to learn about was I have a whole scene and set of sabotage operations set in a steel mill, an old steel mill. China is a major steel supplier to the world, but China's steel is often not considered the best steel. So I had to learn how you make steel if you're going to play around with steel. I had a dam that's a topic in the book. Well, I had to learn enough about how to build a dam to figure out how you knock down a dam. Now, no one should hire me now after this to go out and build them a dam.
So you're not
That would
hanging
not be
up
a
your
smart
dam
move.
building shingle or anything like that?
Right. No, I think not. Now, maybe knocking it down is another story. But,
Okay.
so that's where I had to do my research. And, I had an understanding of the scope of the Belt and Road Initiative, but obviously I did plenty of research to confirm my facts and things of that sort. But, part of the benefits of writing fiction is just with a fair amount of foundation and reality, you can go off anywhere you want.
That is true. Literary license, that ability to, facts are stubborn things, but you know what? This is fiction. We don't have to worry as much about that.
And part of what I want is I want people who don't know China or don't know anything about all this. It's a learning experience. There's enough truth in here that people can glean a lot about China, and there's no falsehoods, or at least none intentionally. If I screwed up, I screwed up, but certainly not intentionally. The people who know China, who have read the book, have agreed on its accuracy as it relates to China. So I've been pleased with that. I'd hate to think I got that grossly wrong, and I'm not a secret agent or ex spy like that. I did one podcast with a guy who used to be a spy, so that was interesting. But you can, if you give it a little thought, you can come up with lots of ways to conduct surveillance on people by amateurs. My characters are generally amateurs, so have to figure out amateurish ways to do things. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I don't use X SEAL Team 6 or X Rangers or anything of that sort, because I couldn't pull off, for one reason, I couldn't pull off the authenticity of it. But in addition, there are plenty of people writing with those characters, and I'll leave it to them.
So no Ethan Hunts. We're not looking at
no. No, but if Tom Cruise wants to do my movie, he's welcome to.
He's more than welcome.
That's what Lee Child said.
I had the pleasure of hanging out with Elmore Leonard one afternoon and talking to him extensively about his books. I don't know if you're a fan or not, but one thing that he told me was that his favorite thing about writing was the heavies. He's like, I love my heavies. You got good heavies in your book?
That's great. Actually, I agree with that. I've never heard that before, but I agree. And I probably spend more pages on the bad guys than I do on my heroes. This is, some books you start with an incident, and then the rest of the book is the hero working their way through to figure out how it happens. Here, we're watching the bad people, the terrorists and their colleagues, pulling off things throughout, and the hero sort of chasing behind and figuring, seeing what's happening. So I also have a lot of characters with two sides to them. One of my main terrorists also has a heart, where he helps out somebody who he has gotten to work for him. The man has a young daughter who's very sick. this terrorist who has access to large amount of funds tries to get the daughter medical help, ultimately sends the daughter and the man's wife to America to get the proper help and saves her life. Now, and that was purely mainly out of doing good. On the other hand, he then forces his operative to have to stay with him and commit all sorts of horrible acts. So there's a dual personality there. And one of my characters has to make some serious ethical issues. You know, the expression, I do anything for my family, do anything to save my family. Clearly, if you had to hurt somebody in your family or somebody else, you're going to hurt the other person, unless you really don't like your family. I mean, maybe if it's your mother-in-law or something, you don't like them. But other than that, you're not going to do that. But how far does that go? And one of my characters is confronted with that issue. How many people would they potentially see die to save their family? And we're looking here at a terrorist attack that could kill several hundred people. Does the man say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to kill several hundred people and his wife and daughter may die? Or will he truly do anything to spare his family? It's an interesting question.
Like the trolley incident in Ethics 101, right?
Yeah.
So
yes.
we've all heard of the hooker with the golden heart. I've never heard of the terrorist with the golden heart. That's a new character there.
You can have it. Remember,
not being a writer, I could probably say that probably writing for Darth Vader is more fun than writing for Luke Skywalker. I could see that. So, in your intro that was recorded a little earlier, it says you've appeared on Chinese television. How has the Chinese taken this book? I mean, have you gotten any feedback from the Chinese at all?
I have not. The book is only available in China via Amazon, and I don't know whether it would get in or not. I will say this. The Chinese know who I am. The Chinese government knows who I am. I've traveled to China enough times. They don't care about me and I'm not relevant, but they know who I am. I had a 10-year visa. So, I'm on their records. They know who I am. The book is not negative towards the Chinese people.
Right.
In all my travels, I have found the Chinese people to be nothing but nice. I've never had a problem at all and found people to be very gracious and friendly. And they're portrayed that way in the book. Mm-hmm. That's not so with the party officials or the government, but they're not portrayed in this book as evil, any more evil than the terrorists who were attacking them. If we had a book where the U.S. was being attacked by terrorists and the CIA and the government was fighting back, we'd be tough too. So that's how they're responding. So the book really is not at all anti-China. If anything, you can argue that it's somewhat sympathetic towards China as the victim here.
And that's important because, a lot of people here in the United States, we get our impression of China from news feeds. We get our impression from social media. And in many cases, it's almost like the impression about Americans, outside of the United States. There's so many misconceptions that we take, and sometimes we conflate the government and the people as being the same. And the fact is that it could be no farther from the truth because they're not in any way. And like I said, it was interesting to me when I was reviewing some of this, the idea of China under attack, that really was a really hard thing for me to get my head around because we see them, I don't know, we see them as this like, they're the irresistible economic force, but they just seem to be also the immovable object at the same time. And this concept of China under attack using technology, which is something that we always give China so much credit for, was kind of a little difficult to say, oh, okay.
Well, you're right, which is why we're talking about very careful terrorist attacks,
Right.
which are much harder to stop, no matter how big or powerful China is or the United States is. We all know that if a foreign power or some third party wanted to infiltrate here and pull off terrorist attacks, that it's very hard to stop. The less centralized things are, the easier it is to get away with. So the mission here is not to wage an all-out war or shut down China's technological systems or anything like that. It's much more slow process. And in fact, one of the lines of the bad guys, the terrorists in this, is that China was always known for being patient and playing the long game, but it no longer does so. And now my terrorists are playing the long game. They're committed to this, and they don't expect results tomorrow, that they will continue this and carry it out over the years as necessary to succeed.
And that's very appropriate, because I think many people believe that if China was vulnerable, it's vulnerable to death by a million cuts, not by one. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I really see that as, when we start really thinking of China, and in many ways, the United States is the same way. Maybe not as many cuts at this point in time, but, it would take, you're not going to do it in one fell swoop. You're not going to do it overnight, but it is something that, again, a terrorist group comes in there and just small little cuts. We saw back in 9/11 when there was a terrorist attack on New York City, where you are, how much that impacted, because we didn't think it was possible. We really, I mean, I remember where I was at the time of the attack. I remember what I was doing at the time, and
Same here.
Watching the television and just simply not believing what I was seeing, because it's like, this can't be happening here. And I wonder if the Chinese are in the same way, because as you say, they have always been very patient. They've always been they're the guys behind the door, behind the curtain and pulling the strings. And I guess my question would be is, do you think they're vulnerable? Or are they as vulnerable as your book is really presenting that they are?
Well, my book, do I think they're vulnerable to individual attacks, as you put it, individual cuts?
Sure.
Sure, absolutely. If you're determined, if you have a group with enough backing, you can do those things. But do I think that China is vulnerable to be totally reduced? No, nor do I hope that we are. But let's ask a different question. Why should we want China to be destroyed? Why isn't it enough that we get China to a point of cooperation, totally preserve things at a diplomatic, economic level? Why do we have to be opponents with each other? I mean, statistically, the odds are very high that in the next 10 to 15 years, as I understand it, their economy is going to be larger than ours. That's a fact, considering that they have almost 4 times as many people as we do. That's not shocking. Their controlled economy, their authoritarianism. Look, I am completely opposed to an authoritarian government, which is what China's is. Completely opposed to a one-party rule, which China is, and we won't take any of that comments back to the United States for the moment. But the fact is that it enables them to do many things more easily than a democratically elected and less controlled capitalist system can do. I mean, they are capitalists, but controlled capitalists.
Right.
And so it's a very different thing. But I don't think that the outcome has to be that we are enemies.
Absolutely.
And
We've said that
Well,
numerous times. We've said that numerous times here. Scott and I have discussed it, that we should look at them as enemies. This is an opportunity. They have a formula that works. But you know what? So do we. And And they're a little different, those two formulas. And if you brought those two formulas together in a spirit of cooperation and good diplomacy, it could be great for the entire world, really, if you could get that kind of mentality. If we could get out of the idea that the Chinese are the bad guys all the time, that the Chinese are the evil empire, that again,
Yeah.
misconception.
Yeah, let's look at some pluses and minuses relative to China in terms of their aggressiveness and their authoritarianism. On the plus side, other than backing North Korea in the 50s in the Korean incident, or whatever the technical term for it is, not a war, obviously backing North Vietnam. China itself has not, since Mao, has not engaged directly in armed conflict other than occasional small bouts with India over the Tibetan border.
Right.
And I'm actually been told that most of those bouts are fought by throwing rocks at each other. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but it makes a great story that's how they fight rather than shooting each other. But my point is, they haven't been the ones going out and engaging in wars throughout the world for any reason. They haven't been doing that. On the other hand, the Chinese system these days is based on cell phones these days, mobile phones. Everybody has one, everybody uses it, and you have to use it. That is the overwhelming means of payment for anything. You go in the subway, you use your phone. Buy a railroad ticket, plane ticket, hotel, restaurants, everything uses the phone. The phones are all accessible to the government. So the government can tell whatever you're doing, wherever you are, and by the same token, China has a huge camera system, monitoring system to see what people are doing. Now, personally, I don't want to live in that environment. Not that I'm doing anything bad, but I just choose not to be that closely monitored. But that is what it's like there, and that is, one of the differences between us, where they're clearly negative in my mind.
Absolutely. And let's face
Yeah.
it, you don't hear about too many mass shootings in China at schools.
No, you don't, and obviously that goes to the issue of gun control.
Absolutely.
And very few people in China have guns. Most of the police are not armed.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to accommodate ourselves to at this point is that Xi is China right now, and that
Correct.
when we speak of China, we generally think of the Chinese Communist Party. We think of Politburo. We think of the sort of the government being a little bit more diffuse. There's something about being in power too long that I think really does affect leaders of countries in a really negative way. And one of the things that I think that hopefully Trump is cognizant of, I'm sure he is that
Yeah.
Xi considers Taiwan his most core natural interest and has
It's
tied unification between mainland China and Taiwan as a key part of his legacy. And like Putin with Ukraine, really wants to see in his lifetime the reunification of China. And that's putting a lot of pressure on him, and it puts pressure on us as well, because he, is a clever man and does not appear to be making a big, bold military move on Taiwan, but has done other things to sort of move Taiwan in his direction. For example, recently he met with the opposition leader to Taiwan's government, Taiwan's
correct.
president, who is not obviously a big fan of Xi's, and so he feels that perhaps that he can move Taiwan closer to China especially if the people of Taiwan don't trust anymore that we're going to be there to defend them. And, I think we've promised them, I think it was $11 billion worth of armaments. That I don't think we've delivered there.
Correct.
I don't think we're going to deliver them anytime soon because we need them in our own misadventure in Iran. But I do think that right now he's moving to a point where he's got the possibility of reunification with Taiwan without resorting to war. Should he resort to war, though? Should he resort to warlike measures like a blockade, which I think they've sort of simulated without
Correct.
actually doing? The world would be in a very, very bad place. And it's interesting that, and how familiar does this sound? 1/5 of the world's trade that goes by sea goes through the Taiwan Strait.
That I
And
did
that
not know.
and Taiwan, yeah. And so Japan and South Korea are two of our bigger trading partners. Everything that they produce is shipped through the Taiwan Strait, pretty
That goes
much.
back to a point. That goes back to a point we discussed earlier, which is that if we don't support Taiwan, then other countries, Japan and South Korea, have to question our support for them. And one thing
Oh,
I've wondered about, but I don't know the answer to, is the extent to which the Russian economy derives goods from Taiwan. Do they get they clearly are not supposed to get the very best chips, but how much of their chips are coming from Taiwan? And how would they feel if China, Xi, had control of those chips? I don't know the answer to that, but it's an interesting twist on the question of the Soviet-Sino relationship, which is an interesting one, and how Russia feels about being pushed to the side, in effect, by China's dominant role in the world today.
and that's one area where you would really hope that we had a different kind of leader that going over there than we do. But because just as Russia seems to be a vassal state of China right now, like the junior partner, and that's just something that they have to deal with because they don't have the economic might to, without China, to even fight the war against Ukraine. Trump has really, in a lot of ways, made the United States a vassal state to Russia, doing a lot of things that Putin wants him to do, which I really find distasteful, of course. And so that alliance, which is also based, by the way, on energy, because China gets most of its energy from Iran, but it gets a fair amount also from both Venezuela and Russia. Right now, we've got a stranglehold on Venezuela and Iran's oil, or to an extent that we do to Iran, but certainly Venezuela, and we can stop if we want to, and we have done, Russia from exporting energy to Beijing as well. But
I'm not so sure about that.
well, yeah, I mean, we've had the ability to close down Russia's exports to China simply by working with Ukraine to stop them from being able to do shipping. But in any event, the sort of the trio there is an interesting one because we have a fairly antagonistic relationship with China that's important, at least in trade, right? I mean, a lot of trade. We don't have any kind of real trade with Russia at all, but China and Russia have trade together. And so it's a strange isosceles triangle that really does depend on Chinese American relationships. And were we to have a stronger trade relationship with China in the form of a bilateral investment treaty, which we almost had in 2016, after 10 years of negotiating, which I think actually may have begun in the Reagan administration and then was picked up by Bill Clinton and then almost finished by the Obama administration, but blew up completely once Trump became president. That there was a cross-border private investment, a lot of investment together in things that was going to be a very powerful trade relationship between the United States and China that because of his antagonism to China, Trump killed.
Yeah. Well,
I will say one more thing.
Yeah.
If China did make a military move against Taiwan, one way or another, and I just read this, it would shrink America's GDP by 7%, a massively destabilizing move. And so the number one objective really has to be that Taiwan is protected, that the Strait of Taiwan is protected, and that China does not feel compelled to make any kind of military move against Taiwan. You could deal with him, working their opposition government. Taiwan's a democracy. They elect their president. Their president right now is not on very good terms with Xi and mainland China, but that could always change at some point, and it would be to their benefit and our detriment if that happened.
Well, I'm not sure that it would be to their benefit, but I think you make many, many good points, Scott. One thing I will say is in reading Attacking the Dragon, bringing it back home, one of the main questions is who's behind this? We find an operative on the ground. We look for a controller, somebody controlling them. Who's controlling them? Who's ultimately responsible? If you think back over the conversation we've just had, you can think of a lot of countries, including, and some we haven't mentioned, such as India. India right now is on good terms with China, but any day, things could get very, very messy between India, the United States, Taiwan, Japan, Korea. There are many countries, Europe, which could be behind efforts to control China's global expansion. And one of the fun aspects of this book is trying to determine who it is. So, there are a lot of possibilities. Maybe they team up. Maybe the whole world is against China.
Will we get this in the sequel?
I was going to ask if it was Ireland.
Actually, our heroes do not learn who is behind this all in the first book. But at the very end of the book, at the very end of the book, there is a leak. There is disclosure to keep you excited for the next one. I debated. Right. I gave a lot of thought as to whether or not to leave it up in the air, but I decided it would be too unsatisfying to leave it unresolved. So I did include that, and I think that your readers will say, all right, that's a good ending. I think readers, I know that readers like the ending very much. And they go, oh my God, I can't believe that.
Can't believe it's Elon Musk.
Oh, Scott, you just gave it away.
Those EVs, those Chinese EVs are killing it right now. So.
Oh man. Well, Mark,
he teamed up with his father.
Yeah. All right. Well, Marc Ross, this has been a real pleasure. The books are The Conscripted Extremists and Attacking the Dragon. They are available on Kindle. They're also available at amarcross.com /books, and that is Mark with a C. We suggest that you guys all get out there and check it out. I know it's on my reading list this weekend, so it is definitely going to get read this weekend. It sounds like an exciting book, definitely a different premise, and hopefully, sometimes we take from fiction and we can actually put it to the real world and gain a little bit more understanding. And that is one of the important things about fiction, that we can see it in a different light, and we can maybe, make different conclusions. So,
The lie that tells the truth. I think
that's
somebody
right.
said that.
Sometimes, when we look at fiction throughout history, how many people that wrote fiction really predicted the future? And we go back to all the science fiction and all that stuff, and it really is. It can be a very telltale kind of a medium for us to understand, and hopefully people will begin to understand, China maybe from a different light. Because again, I say this is a different type of book as far as when I was reading, just the first two chapters of it. This is different, and I think it's very, very enjoyable. And we definitely encourage all of our listeners to get out there, check it out, and hopefully, Mark, we can have you back and talk about your next installment.
Well, I'd love to do that, Mark, and I thank you and Scott. And the other thing I just finished to say is, not only do I hope people take away from it what you said, but I want people to enjoy it. If you read a book and you get to the end and say, I didn't like that, or the author did this wrong or did that wrong, I don't like this. I want people to enjoy it. And so far, my readers have enjoyed it. There's even a few laughs in it, despite all the terrorism and all that good stuff. I enjoy a good laugh, so threw a few references to classic rock, and if your readers are astute and know that, they'll catch it. So we'll see. So thank you both again.
Scott,
it's a real
Scott
pleasure.
will definitely pick up on the classic rock, and if you have anything,
all right, Scott, if you find
mentions,
you have to let me know whether or not you find it. Okay.
Or if anything is about Monty Python or something like that, we'll pick up on all that too. So
all right, now I got to put them in the sequel.
Got to put them in the sequel. Hey, Marc Ross, thank you very much for joining us. It was absolutely been an awful lot of fun. And again, the books are The Conscripted Extremist and Attacking the Dragon, and that is amarcross.com/books. Get out there, check it out, and I think you're going to find it a really enjoyable read. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershworth, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium dedicated to providing solutions to social and political issues for NGOs and international government agencies. Through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research, the Phoenix Research Group advances understanding and practical strategies for complex challenges. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.